Hello everyone, this is Group 5. We will talk about vegetation analysis and weed management. In Group 5, there are Kanistha, Andi, Jafar, Maria, and Debbie. Firstly, I will talk about the definition of vegetation analysis. Vegetation analysis is a technique for determining the composition and organization of a plant community's species. Phytosociological analysis is another name for vegetation analysis. And then, what is the purpose of analyzing the vegetation? 1. Find out the existing weed vegetation in detail from the kinds of species, number, weight, and frequency. 2. Determine the weed community or society in field. 3. Determine dominant and codominant weeds. 4. Determine the coefficient of community or diversity weed. 5. Determine the right way of control. And the last is which annuals are controlled before flowering, which annually controlled periodically with a systemic herbicide at the time of active growth.
In conducting a vegetation analysis, some data will be obtained, namely qualitative data. Qualitative data obtained by observing in the field without using sample plots showing the distribution of weed species, but through the end result of autecology research. To obtain this data, it is necessary to observe, namely, first, length of life, whether the plant is annual or chronic or perennial. In annual plants, the lifespan is only a year or less than a year. The seeds germinate at the beginning of the rainy season and grow, flower, and bear fruit at the end of the dry season. Examples of the annual plants are Ageratum conizoides and Portulaca oleracea. In chronic plants or perennial plants, the life cycle is several times in 3 years or more, and reproduce both generatively and vegetatively. Examples of perennial plants are Cyperus rotundus, Micania micrantha, and Sambucus javanicus. 2. Sociability Sociability, which states the relationship between existing weed types and so how they are spread or grouped in the community. 7. For example, living alone, in group, clustered, and scattered, or forming a wide expanse. Next, stratification. Stratification is the classification of plants based on difference in plant height. In the case, they are generally grouped into classes 1 until 20 centimeters, 21 until 40 centimeters, 41 until 60 centimeters, 61 until 80 centimeters, and 81 centimeters and to higher. Periodicity, periodicity, which which show the period of or growth phase of the weed species. For example, the germination period, the flower period, the fruit period, and the seeds dispersal period. Quantitative data. Quantitative data obtained by making observation in the field using sample of plots or sample. To obtain this data, it is necessary to observe, namely, number, size, wet or dry weight, and area covered. Parameter in calculating vegetation analysis. There is density, dominance, frequency, and important value. Density. Absolute density is the number of individuals of that species in the sample plot. And this is formula of density.
The next topic to be discussed is about dominance or abundance. Absolute dominance or absolute abundance is the total biomass value or total volume of a specific organism or plant in the area. And to get to the relative dominance of that organism, we have to divide the absolute number or absolute abundance of all species in the area from the absolute dominance or abundance of a specific organism or species. And the answer for that will be then multiplied by 100. That is the percentage of the relative dominance. For example, we have the nut grass or the Cyperus rotundus. In a 100 square meter yard, we are looking for the relative dominance of the nut grass against all the other species of grasses present in that area. We have also the Cynodon dactylon and the chickwood. So, to get the relative dominance of the nut grass, we have to get the absolute dominance or the absolute totality of the all species present in the 100 square meter and multiply that number from the absolute dominance or absolute abundance of the nut grass. And the answer for that will be multiplied by 100 to get the percentage. So the answer, the final answer is the relative dominance of the nut grass against all the other grasses in the area. In frequency, frequency in the most general sense is defined as the number of times an event happens per unit of time. In botany and agriculture, however, specifically in weed science, frequency means how often a species of weed occurs in a given area. Absolute frequency is the number of sample plots containing that type. And to get the relative frequency, we have to divide the total frequency of all species from the frequency of a species, and the answer will be multiplied by 100. And the importance value, to arrive to the number of the importance value, we have to add the number of the relative density and the relative dominance and the relative frequency, and the final answer will be our importance value.
Next is methods in vegetation analysis. First method is estimate methods. Estimates are done by expert or experienced people by looking at the field. Second is quadratic methods. Quadratic methods have plots are either rectangle, square, or circle divided into quadrats. It is a classic tool for study of ecology, including biodiversity. Third is intercept methods or line intercept methods. This method is used in very large areas like in a plantation. The materials commonly used to perform this method are open reel measuring tape with length of 25 meters, a pencil, a tally sheet, and a rope to indicate the lengths and areas. And the last one is point methods. Point methods is also called the pinpoint methods. Is used for non-destructive measurements of plant cover and plant biomass such as weeds. In a pinpoint analysis, a frame with a fixed grid pattern is placed above the vegetation. A pin is inserted vertically through one of the grid points into the vegetation, and typically
touch a number of plants.
An integrated approach to weed management. Integrated weed management is an approach that uses a combination of cultural, physical, biological, and chemical methods to provide the best possible weed management in each situation. An integrated approach to weed management can greatly increase the effectiveness of your efforts while reducing the expense associated with herbicide use. The first step of any weed management program is to identify the weed species. With a little knowledge about the species, we can identify weaknesses which will help us manage the weed quickly and effectively. Here are some weed management methods. The first one is the physical weed management, which have different types. Physical weed management includes hand weeding, hoeing, cultivation, mowing, and mulching. Next is cultural weed management. It uses the drip irrigation systems, selective fertilizer application, and maintaining healthy planting. Then we also have the biological weed management, also known as biocontrol. It is an action of one or more natural enemies of weed species, which may include diseases, insects, or other organisms. Last is the chemical weed management, which uses the herbicides. In using chemicals, we have to take note of the safety precautions such as reading labels and carefully selecting the proper chemicals to be used. Last is the sum dominance ratio or the SDR. It is a process where the most important crops per district and per cluster were determined using relative density and relative frequency of crops.
That's all from us. If you have any question, please feel free to write down on the comment section below. And thank you very much.